We're talking men's health this morning. There's a health symposium coming up this weekend in Muskegon dedicated to promoting wellness, education, and empowerment among Black men. Alexis Dye with the BIPOC Wellness Alliance is with us live this morning to tell us all about this event Saturday. Thanks so much for being here, Alexis.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, glad to chat with you. And this is about creating a welcoming space for a conversation about health that sometimes isn't so easy for some of us to have.
Exactly. And in our Black community especially, it's really a challenge to get people to talk about what they're going through or the health challenges that they're experiencing. And so I created this organization to try to address some of those health barriers and disparities that we have in our community. So this weekend, starting with the Black Men's Health Symposium, want to get some men in the room, have some conversation about all things health, mental wellness, which is really huge. That's really a topic that people, all of us, tend to kind of ignore.
Yeah.
So
I'm glad that there's been more of a focus on mental health, but we need to keep those conversations going.
We do.
Make people more comfortable with having these conversations. It's happening Saturday, as we've said, at the Spurs Center.
MCC Sturris and Technology Center.
At the Muskegon Community
College. Yeah.
Walk us through what's going to happen on that day.
So on that day, hopefully we'll have, a room for men that are, really eager to learn some new things. And if we impact the lives of, just a couple people that get them to start talking or being more proactive about their health, that would be great. So we have a great keynote, Dr. Byron Bernardo, who's a physician in Muskegon. He will be our keynote talking about all things health. We're going to have some men kind of tell their story. They have some personal journeys that they've gone through and come out on the other side of. And so they'll talk about what that is to be proactive and getting checkups and things and share some of those stories. And then we'll have another Dr. Lennox Forrest is going to do our mental health piece. So he's going to speak to that. And we'll have a great dialogue around that. We'll have lunch, and we'll also have a breakout session for our young men, because our young teens starting like 15, 16 and up. How do you transition, and when do you start getting checkups and things like that? So they're going to have an interactive session with a barber in a breakout room to talk about health and wellness with them. And then we'll all kind of come back together, and then we'll have a panel discussion on all the things, and guys will have a chance to ask questions from our speakers, and hopefully it's a great dialogue.
So important to have these conversations. And sometimes you need to have them with people who look like you to understand, hey, this is something that all of us go through. And I'm glad that you said that people will be sharing their personal health stories as well, because oftentimes many people, men and women, will ignore the signs and think everything will be fine. And of course, we know a lot of times that early detection is key.
It is. And that was one of the other things that kind of prompted me in this, because I had friends or acquaintances who had significant others or, spouses, what have you, said they weren't feeling good for months, and then by the time they did decide to go, it was either a diagnosis that probably could have been treated, or it was terminal, or they already passed away within the time that they found out, like a short time after they were like gone.
Yeah.
I remember going through that with my brother. He was thinking that he just had like arthritis or something in his hip and was getting shots. And when he found out he had cancer, and the doctor said he's probably had it for a long time. So we just don't, think of that or think that it's that serious. And we really should do, get thorough checkups and speak up and ask. And also, hopefully in this conversation, how to advocate for themselves, right? Because if you're not, as opposed to just going to say, well, I don't feel good, you've got to know how to advocate for yourself and be able to explain what's going on to get the answers that you want.
And that, too, is what's so great about events like this, putting those health professionals in the room for people to see, okay, this isn't as intimidating. This isn't as scary to have this conversation. And some people may also not know what is the next step. Who do I talk to about this issue? So I know you all will answer some of those questions.
Yep, we have the folks in the room between Dr. Bernardo and Dr. Forrest. They will definitely be able to answer those questions for them.
Yeah, so what do people need to do if they want to be sure and be there on Saturday?
Starts at 9 a.m. We do have, there should be flyers, there's things on social media, there's an Eventbrite link that you can scan and also register there, just so we can have, some a number of people, make sure we
get an idea who's
like that,
showing
things
up.
like that. But they can show up. It's from 9 to 1. Like I said, we will have all those things. We'll also have some vendors there. So if people are looking for resources or education on other things, screenings, whatever, we tend to have all of that available to them in one space. So
And I want us to talk a little bit more about what we sort of touched on earlier, how the issue is that these conversations are not taking place. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, they are not. I mean, there's just a stigma, especially in our communities of color, that, and for some of it, it's kind of like how we were raised. You know, it's like we don't talk about things outside of, right? Or if you're going through things, you just tough it out. You
Keep
know,
it to yourself.
Pray your way through. You know, it'll be fine, and that's not always the case. And so, if you're, you know, really struggling in that, or maybe for folks that are like on their own by themselves, how do you know if you're depressed? I mean, if you're usually pretty happy-go-lucky and just doing your things, you know, and you just kind of keep pushing, but somewhere, you know, somehow that catches up with you over time. So you got to find somebody that you can confide in.
And like we said, you know, yes, there are more people having these conversations, but oftentimes, like you said, it's how we were raised. Just smile through it. You'll be fine. You'll feel better. Versus like, no, tell me what's wrong. Let's have this conversation.
Yes. And that's this thing is like, for whoever the important people in your life, pay attention. And if you see something that seems like they're off or that they might be going through, then ask. You know, don't be afraid to ask.
Because we'll be the first ones to really notice that something is wrong.
Something is wrong.
What am I leaving out about why it's important to have these conversations, or just anything else you want people to know about your event Saturday?
You know, for people of color, and especially for Black men, you know, the mortality rate is too high. You know, suicide rates for our Black teens is really high and steady increasing. So we've got to find a way to have these conversations, and people trying to seek and find information on their own. And so, again, with the organization, my thing is like, how do you kind of walk alongside people and give them that extra support that they need, not just give them a number here, we'll go here, or go do this, and expect that they do, right? Because people have a lot of things going on. So it takes a lot of follow-up and sometimes some hand-holding. So we got to be a community, you know, that supports each other and that helps each other. And I think as we start doing that, we can change, you know, some of the statistics that's around
start tackling
our mortality.
some of these issues head on. Well, it's such a great first step when you can have all of those resources in one room, which is what's happening at your event Saturday at Muskegon Community College. Alexis, so great chatting with you this morning.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
We're back right after this.